Hello, my name is Tony McCammon with the University of Idaho, and I'm here with my colleague Wayne Jones. And today we're working on backyard fruit growing. And we're going to work on the pruning aspects of fruit trees and what homeowners can do to produce high quality fruit in their home gardens. Really, this is really what consists of good pruning tools in the orchard. Notice there is no chainsaw associated with these tools. This is all you need to prune a fruit tree properly. This guy here is used for anything smaller than your pinky. That's what these and they're bypass pruners. They pass by each other. The other type of pruners are called anvil pruners, and they will crush the cambium of one side of your branch as you try to chop it, and that causes damage and it doesn't heal over properly. So make sure you have yourself a good pair of bypass pruners, nice and sharp. Next, the next one up, this one will take anything around your thumb, so about a half inch, half inch or less. And this one is good for 3/4 of an inch. These are good for 3/4 of an inch. Anything bigger than that, then I'll pull out the handsaw and use the handsaw to prune off those branches. And I want to prune this so I know where the fruit's going to be. This is a good time of the year to prune. Any month that doesn't end with R is a good month to prune fruit trees. So this is just a big mess. And once again, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to cut out 1/3 of this tree, and I'm going to leave the branches where I want fruit, and I'm going to cut out everything else. So there are 3 different types of cuts when working with your fruit trees. There's a heading cut, there's a thinning cut, and there's a stub cut. The heading cut usually is also known as directional pruning. And so for example, with this bud right here, if I was to prune this back, I'm going to prune it back to this point as a heading cut, heading back to this bud. This bud then will break, and it's now in a direction that it will be growing out in this direction, away from the tree. Now if I prune back to this bud, I've now pruned this bud back, headed this bud back, or headed this stem back to this bud, which will now grow in this direction. And as I've said before, anything growing up into the tree is not good fruiting wood. We want fruiting wood that's growing out away from the tree at about a 45 to 60 degree angle from the tree, and that's the bud that we want growing out. So that's an example of a heading cut. A thinning cut would be where these branches are crossing. A thinning cut will be bringing this bud all the way back to the main stem. That's a thinning cut. Here's another example of a thinning cut. I have a stem all the way back to the main transition from the main stem. That's a thinning cut. A stubbing cut is usually done on younger trees when you're trying to develop good fruiting wood. And a good example of this in this tree would be, say I don't have this branch here. All I have is this branch to go off of, and it's growing straight up, but I need something growing out in this direction, and I really don't have any buds. I don't have any buds growing out in this direction. All I have are buds growing here and here and here. So what I might do is just come back to a bud, and then the next year when this grows up, I may find a bud on that one. So that's a stub cut, where I'm producing a new shoot for the following year, where I might have a bud that will come out in this direction. So that's a stub cut, and that's like you're looking into the future on stub cuts. Another form of a stub cut, which a lot of people are aware of, is when people are topping trees. That's basically a stub cut. They're topping the tree, and they're forcing all of these buds to break dormancy, and they create lots of water sprouts. But that in fruit production, we call that a stubbing cut. And I'd probably just bring it right back to here. I create some new spurs here. I got a couple spurs in here. This will produce some good fruit. This will produce some fruit. little limb out here will produce some fruit. These limbs are a little too close, and I got some crossing branches, and this is coming from up there. This will probably be gone, but still, this is crossing a little too close. I'm going to cut this out, let this be some good fruiting wood. I'm going to thin that back as well. Instigate more growth closer to the tree a little bit. You see this oval pruning, that's usually caused from getting a little bit too close to that crotch angle and not coming at a good enough degree angle away from it. So it's a little bit more flush cut, so you get a little bit more of this narrow donut healing over, because these two areas are not healing over as quickly as these side areas are. A lot of people ask us, well, what should I put on this? There's those black sprays and other things that shouldn't I spray that wound so it'll heal over better? And in our dry climate, that is not recommended. Basically what that does is that doesn't allow it to dry out, and it doesn't allow it to heal over. What that sealant does, that black tar or something, putting it over our cut, we've just cut it. Bacteria is floating around in the air, and we've just sealed that bacteria against our cambium, against our wound. We've just sealed that in and sealed the moisture in at that. So we've just created an environment for that some type of disease possibly to infect our tree. So in our dry climates of Idaho, we recommend leaving that as an open wound so it can heal over properly and dry out properly. Sometimes we need to decide whether we're growing fruit for consumption, or if we're growing a tree to provide some ornamental value to the landscape. This tree is at a point in its life where it's not going to produce any high quality fruit. It's making a good shade tree for a backyard, maybe a little messy at times. So you have to decide whether you're going to keep this tree as a producing tree, or just maintain it as a good ornamental tree. After about 40 years, these trees really start to decline. Actually, in most producing commercial orchards, fruit trees will produce high quality fruit for about 30 to 35 years. After about 35 years, you start seeing a decline in fruit production, smaller fruit, more disease, more insects. And these fruit spurs also, they start getting pretty old. This fruit spur is probably 15 to 20 years old, and that's a really old fruit spur to be trying to produce good quality fruit on. Most of your fruit spurs you don't want any older than about 6 years. So pruning is a technique that allows us to produce new spurs and rejuvenate the tree for better fruit quality. One thing about apples, and most fruit does not grow well on branches or spurs that are shooting straight up in the air, because what happens is the fruit sits against that stem. So we have this nice ball of fruit hanging on the stem. Insects are pretty smart. Insects are going to climb up the stem or climb around the fruit, and they're going to enter where you didn't spray or against that stem, because they're kind of protected that way. So make sure your fruit is hanging, not hanging against the stem, but hanging into the air. One of the dangers of having these older trees is you start getting these branches that have, if it hasn't been pruned, year after year, you'll start seeing these crossing branches that got too heavy with fruit and have bent down, and they start intertwining themselves. And as they grow, or as the wind blows, they create damage and scar tissue that diseases and other problems can get in and cause death to that branch. So maintaining free limbs without these crossing branches, making sure that we prune those out every year. Actually, one of my rules is you can prune out crossing branches anytime, as well as broken branches, as well as dead or diseased branches. So prune those out at any time during the year to maintain a healthy tree. We have some dead tissue here on this limb, so we could prune this out definitely now. But even when this thing is completely leafed out, and we start seeing these dead limbs, we could come in and prune those out because they're not going to come back to life. There's no sense in having them in the tree. Look at this. This is a good example of what might happen if we leave these stubs. You see it's rotted back. The tree hasn't been able to develop enough nutrients to cover over, to heal over or encapsulate that dead tissue. And so it's continually just rotting back. So this, I would take this whole branch off. This is one of the don'ts for home fruit gardens, is we do not leave fruit hanging on the tree. These fruit can get fire blight. There's a little hole there, probably an exit hole of a codling moth larva, and a lot of these that are on the ground could have codling moth adults hibernating around them on the bark. And if this is the case, we need to remove this fruit before it starts to rot at this stage. We're in springtime now, and we still have fruit hanging on the tree, nice and squishy, perfect entry, and for insects as well as for a lot of diseases to start producing in this apple orchard.